This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and my guest today is Bruce Craul. Bruce spent 5 decades leading hotels, resorts, restaurants, and hospitality teams, rising from frontline roles to COO of Harbor Walk Hospitality. In his book, The Hospitality Advantage, he shows why hospitality drives performance in every industry, not only service businesses. Bruce brings real leadership lessons shaped by operators, employees, and customers who decide outcomes in moments. Bruce Craul, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm awesome. If I was any better, I'd be twins.
Oh my God. That is one of my favorite jokes. A doctor friend used that all the time on me, and I use it now with other people, and they think I'm a psychopath. Yeah. So I appreciate you using that line. It's a
nothing's original.
No. That is a classic, but thank you very much for sharing that. So I want to kind of start talking about hospitality in the future and then go backwards. I want to do this almost like a Christopher Nolan movie. I want to start with the future first. And being that, we all talk about in 2025 was AI is going to replace all these jobs. People aren't going to have work, blah, blah, blah. And I when that conversation kind of happens, I always think about okay, it's going to replace a lot of white collar jobs, but what won't it replace? And I immediately think, as you, my guest today, is hospitality. There's no way on God's green earth that hospitality will be replaced by AI. I'm sure it will augment the experience. I'm sure make it easier for booking, all that jazz. But the idea of jobs being replaced by AI and robotics, not in the next 100 years, if anything. So tell me about that and how you feel about the future of hospitality, knowing that it's pretty much AI proof.
Yeah, so the first robot I ever saw was on The Wizard of Oz, and his name was the Tin Man. And he didn't ask for a brain, and he didn't ask for lots of different things. What he asked for was a heart. And so robots and tin men don't have hearts. It takes a heart and a heart to heart connection to have hospitality. And that's why AI cannot replace hospitality, because it's all about the heart.
And you learned this lesson very early on because in the book, you describe hospitality as a gift, not a transaction. And I think that's probably a mindset that, forgive me for saying this, I don't think everyone in hospitality believes in, but I think the best of the best believe in. Tell me about coming to that realization about hospitality as a gift, not as a transaction.
Well, here's what I've learned over the last 50 years or more. That about 80% of the people in the hospitality business don't even get it right. And then 80% of everybody outside of the hospitality business can't even spell it. They don't get it. They don't understand it. And it's really not their fault. They are victims, of society and what's important and what's not. And so the people that really understand that if you apply hospitality principles to all walks of your life, but especially business, that you can really benefit from that, and it doesn't cost anything, So I realized it very early on, as it says in the book, I forget which, I think it's in the first chapter. I observed my father when I went on the road with him one time. He was a traveling salesman, and I sat in a Holiday Inn, and the first 2 words were checking in. And by the way, I was in Charleston a week ago today, and the first thing out of the mouth of the person behind the front desk was checking in, not hello, how are you, where are you from? I mean, and so there was the absence of hospitality, and you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And so she failed on that one, but it happens all the time. People, they just don't understand. And so why do they not understand? It's not a deficiency of execution. It's a deficiency of knowledge. They just don't know any better.
Yeah. Also, I think a lot of it is, and this is not just in the hospitality industry, the transactional nature of life in general. I think a lot of it has to go down to people just too busy, and they don't have the self-awareness to stop and think, oh, did I forget to say hello to that person? Or, even in a white collar setting, oh, did I forget to say hello to someone walking past me in the hallway? So I think there is that idea of we're just too freaking busy. And a lot of us are not trained with the self-awareness to realize that, oh, I was just a dick just a moment ago, but didn't notice it because I'm so busy. And I know in hospitality, depending on where you work and what city you're in, some of those hours, as you know, Bruce, working here, they're a grind. I like to use that. A lot of people that are working these days are surviving, not thriving. And I think in the hospitality industry, you see that more than ever.
Well, so I have, as soon as you said the word too busy, my mother popped into my mind. My mother said, we all have the same number of hours in a day. It's what we do with them that changes everything or makes things important. So the hospitality business is what I call tough but rewarding work, and I remember when I was a food and beverage director of the world headquarters hotel for Holiday Inns in Memphis, Tennessee in 1976. And Kemmons Wilson ate in my dining room almost every day. He's the founding father of Holiday Inns. And he said to me, "So Bruce, you still working a lot?" I said, "Yes, sir. I'm, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day." And he said, "Are you still only working half days?" So, the hospitality business, I mean, if there's a group of people that should be tired and worn out and want to use the phrase too busy, it should be them. But you don't hear it from the people that understand hospitality, because when you really have that embedded in you, when you go to work every day, it's not a job. And when you enjoy something, it's never a job. You just love doing it. And I was blessed that for 46 years, I couldn't wait to go to work. And everybody at work always said, "Don't you want to go home yet?" Because I mean, I just enjoyed it that much. And in the book, I actually say, if you've ever had that feeling of having people over to your house, and it doesn't matter if it's a couple or 8 or 10 or 12 or 20, and you did all the prep, you did all the work, you were the host or hostess, and then all the last couple leaves, and which you make sure that you tell everybody that they're leaving. I don't want to get into all the details, but you're out on the porch and you wave and they leave the last car. You come back in the house, you turn to your wife or your significant other and you high five. And there's that feeling right there. There's that feeling that, wow, that was really something. And so if you know what that feeling is, you know what extending hospitality is. And the beauty of the hospitality business is, for 46 years, I had that feeling every day.
No, that's awesome. And it's funny that you describe the house party and hosting people, because my wife and I do it aplenty here in Charleston. And one of the things that I say is it's exhausting. Like, it's exhausting to host. It's exhausting to, like, the prep work. It's exhausting the actual get together, because you're in like this party host MC mode where you want everyone to make sure they're fair. So I always try to extrapolate that out to like people in hospitality. I'm doing it over the course of 3 or 4 hours. I'm exhausted. And there's folks like you doing it 12 hours a day. How do you build up that muscle that it doesn't exhaust you? Because again, we do it just enough that it's still exhausting for us. But how does it work in your industry in terms of, like, it's almost like getting in shape? It's not like you can go to the gym and get in shape, because there's a lot of mental to it and a lot of physical to what you do in hospitality. How do you prepare and get your body situated where you can perform at an optimal level?
Well, first of all, about half about what you learn or what you need for hospitality you get forever before you ever leave the home, which means that, about half of the people in the country should not apply for a job in the hospitality business, because when you have to work outside your comfort zone, when you have to modify your basic natural self to conform to your environment, it's stressful. And so you burn out. So, for example, if you're really low on extroversion, and you're put into a position where the highest trait you need is extroversion, by noon you're wore out. I mean, because you really don't want to be around people. It's not that you hate people, you're just not comfortable in that environment. And so the first thing you have to do in the hospitality business is match the players with the position. And so part of that is you understanding who you are. So when you understand who you are, and excuse me, as I put in the book, there's assessment tools that can teach you that, like predictive index, where you learn what your 4 basic traits are, and then you make sure that you're working in positions that meet you where you are. Because what happens when you see a lot of unhappy people, it's because their purpose, or their personalities don't match the position they're in. Now, that said, we see people all the time that are really hospitable. And then 2 hours later, I'm thinking of a restaurant, when you're leaving, they're not being the same way you saw them 2 hours ago. And that was because when they applied for the job, they showed the employer who they thought they wanted, not necessarily who they really are. Then they were trained to be hospitable, but when they got tired, they go back to their basic natural self. And that's not the person that, the employer really wanted in that position. So it sounds complicated, but it's really not. So the most important thing for people in the hospitality business at the top is to hire the people with the right personalities and match the players with the position. And that way they stay hospitable all the time because they enjoy it. They can't change it. In fact, they'll leave your employment if those needs, wants, loves, and desires aren't met in their job. They'll go somewhere else where they can get it and use it.
Wow, that's great. And I want to get into your career, but before we do that, I want to talk about, because you kind of described like what the culture could be like because you have such a mix of personalities. And I'm curious because I was trying to rack my brain because I know we were going to talk about this, and I was trying to think of like what industry combines a group of people that want to do hospitality, as a career, and then the people that are just doing it as a job. Maybe it's in between jobs, whether it's working a restaurant, maybe they got laid off. So I couldn't think of another industry where you have this mix of people that are hospitality career people and then hospitality survival job people.
Well,
How does that affect culture?
Well, it's not just isolated to the hospitality business. I mean, retail,
Okay.
which, my son works for Nordstrom. I mean, of course he works in the restaurant business with Nordstrom, but the other people at Nordstrom, okay, they match the players with the positions too. And so what happens is, instead of, I'm not picking on anybody, but just trying to use an example. But, it's not unlike Target, where when you check out, you go through an automated, system, or if you're lucky, you get a cashier that, that may or may not have a great personality, and they pack your bag and, you go out the door. At Nordstrom, they come around the cash wrap and they say, now, and they get really close to you and they say, now, do you want to, us to send these packages down to valet so that they can load it into your car so that you can go eat or do some more shopping? Or would you rather have it now? And you say, well, I'd rather have it now. And they say, okay, are you sure? Because we have a special today in the restaurant that's blah, blah, blah. And, and then that way you can do some more shopping and also relax. And they go, no, I'll take it now. And then, so they come around the cash wrap and they're right there and they hand you the bag. And they say, I just want to, take this final opportunity to thank you for shopping at Nordstrom. And I hope that you see and understand the difference between what we do and what most retail places you go to do. And so you see, it's not isolated to the hospitality business. Now, all that said, there are people behind the scenes, for example, that work for Nordstrom or work for different hotel or restaurant companies. And in accounting, as an example, they don't have to be outgoing, friendly, trusting, eager. They're focused on details. They dream in rows and columns, and they dream about neat, clean, and folded things in housekeeping, right? I mean, so But when they're in the business, they're in the hospitality business, they don't have to be a high extrovert. There's low extroversion jobs. A dishwasher doesn't have to be, although it helps, he doesn't have to be smiling all the time and high-fiving everybody. And somebody that's loading and offloading a big truck in the back of a retail store, they can have a different personality than what you think of when I use the word hospitality. So there's all different personalities for all different positions in all different types of businesses. But if, like Nordstrom or other businesses, where does your business start exuding hospitality? Well, it starts in the parking lot. Everywhere is a zone. If you pass an employee that has a name tag on that's coming to work or leaving work and they get within 10 feet, the Ritz-Carlton rule should apply. Hello, how are you? How are you? Not just hi or hey or a nod. You have to get engaged because you're representing that store that you just came out of. And the place has to be clean. See, all this is hospitality. Sound, lighting, temperature, taste, smell, all those things are hospitality. It's not just meet and greet and remembering your name and a chocolate on a pillow. It's everything. And only 20% of the people really understand what I'm talking about. And that's why I felt compelled to write a book, because I want to leave a footprint where people say the hospitality advantage. We passed that book out to our employees and we went over it and we've changed everything. Our culture is changing. I've seen it happen over and over again. I've managed as many as 56 hotels in 34 states and arrived at hotels that had a horrible culture. But it can be changed, and for little or no money.
That's great. That's great. It is funny too, because I talk to young people and I often get accused of oversimplifying things. But when I would give them advice, because of the nature of the way you describe things in hospitality, but I think that's reflective in a lot of industries, I often say to make it easier for them and to almost like relieve the stress is you just have to be a little bit better than the next person next to you. Like literally, that's just be a little bit better and you'll rise. I mean, you describe these interactions at Nordstrom as opposed to Target, but like when you see an interaction at a Target or a Walmart where the person is like effusive and they're friendly, you remember that, And so advice for younger people is like, just be a little bit better. You don't have to be like a midtrovert, and then all of a sudden be like 100% extrovert. Just be a little bit better than the person next to you, and you are going to stand out. And I know that's no oversimplification, and I'm sure you see that too. Is like, it's not rocket science. It's just trying just a little bit harder.
Well, a little bit. If you're a person like me, if you got enough energy to give a little bit, why not just go full court press and belief in being the best? And right. So I ask people, what's your favorite fast food restaurant? And 9.9 times out of 100, they go Chick-fil-A. And I go, why? And they go, the people. They like the chicken. Other people have good chicken too. But the first thing they ask you for when they take your order at a drive-through is your name. Right. Same at Starbucks, which they're not as consistent as Chick-fil-A. But, Chick-fil-A, I mean, what's your name? I mean, they're happy. They make you feel happy. They remind you as soon as they open their mouth why you're there. I mean, you could forget your order. The people are so nice. So if you're going to go an extra mile, focus on crashing through the ribbon. So there's a book that came out 40 some years ago called In Search of Excellence by Thomas B. Peters. And they looked at what are the things that make the top 10 companies great. And Nordstrom was one of them at the time, as were a lot of other ones. But what's number one in the top 10 things in Search of Excellence, what makes excellent companies great, is belief in being the best. That's number one. So if you believe you're the best, you're not going to just give it an average thrust of energy. You're going to give it all you got. I mean, I always tell people, in the hospitality business, I had people say to me, well, actually, I told them during a 3.5 hour orientation, don't ever say within hearing range, me hear you say I'm tired, because I'm paying for 100% of you and actually requesting 110, and you can't do it when you're tired. So what I'll do is send you home so you can get some rest, so that tomorrow when you come back, you won't be tired. And so I rarely heard it. And
I'm sh-
I maybe
I'm
only
sure no
had to
one ever
send.
uttered the T word around you. They didn't want to be sent home. And speaking of your roles, you start as desk clerk, worked all the way up to the C-suite. I'm curious, during that journey, where did your leadership journey form the most? Like the one that stuck and sort of the way you led teams of people. I mean, obviously as a desk clerk, you're probably not leading as much, but what role or job specifically was the one where you kind of like were able to hone the Bruce Craul, leadership style?
Well, after I graduated from college and with a degree in hospitality, my first assignment with Holiday Inns, who I was working for while I was in college, was in Cocoa Beach. And I got there perfect timing during the Apollo program. And I got exposed to so many, I got exposed to so many different people, because of where it was located. So we had tourists 2 different seasons a year, but we also had astronauts, and that are the most humble, you know, they're just so humble, and their humility is unbelievable. And so you learn from them. And then I learned from newscasters, from, Walter Cronkite, all those people, and you just, so you meet all this mix of people, and then you start seeing and noticing what's missing, because the guy before you might not have the same exposure to the business as someone like me. And so I guess I learned a lot of it there. But since you asked the question, and now I'm examining it even further, it may have been Miami, because I started as you say, a desk clerk, or what we actually changed the name to, guest services representative. Um, the you know 99%, it was me and one other guy were the only two um, Americans, you know, born in the United States in the whole building. The other 150 employees were almost 100% from Cuba, and they came, when they left Cuba when the getting was good. So that was in the early 70s or late 60s. And every one of those people, their job was their profession. In other words, they were a journeyman, they were an apprentice, a journeyman, and then a master. And that was all they wanted to be. Like, so a waiter was a professional waiter, a chef was a professional chef, a bellman was a professional bellman. And those people, their attitude, their sense of giving, they're wanting to go above and beyond, rubbed off on me. And I noticed what they had. So when I got to Cocoa Beach, and I noticed it wasn't the same as that Latin culture that I lived in for almost 3 years in Miami, that we needed to adopt that. And so between Miami and Cocoa Beach, I would say that's where I learned the most. And then I perfected it, because in the hospitality business, if you want to move up, you got to move geographically. So I did. I went to the world headquarters in Memphis, which I mentioned earlier. And then in the South, I always tell people, and as I was the chairman of Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, and I say the thing that keeps me awake at night is all 10,000 people awake moving into Florida, and they don't know what Southern hospitality is. What are we going to do? And I mean, I felt like I have to do something. I have to protect what we have, because as I thought back to college, the the minister of tourism came from the Bahamas and came to Florida International University, and they said, we need help, we're losing market share. And so we went with our clipboards in a class specifically set up for this. And we asked people who got off a plane from the Bahamas, what'd you like about the Bahamas? Well, the water, the beach. And so what did you like the least? And they said the people. And we went, oh. And they go, what didn't you like about the people? With another checklist. Anyway, long story short, we put together a program that said you're going to continue to lose market share to all the other islands, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, whatever, Jamaica, because your people aren't hospitable. And so we put together a program to help them, and they got their market share back. I should tell you that I've been back to the Bahamas many times in the last few years, and they need a tune-up.
Well, it could just be because too many Americans are going over there. Because as you notice, the Southern hospitality is waning in the South because there are so few Southerners that are true blood Southerners. They're coming from the North. I'm one of those that came from the North South. So it could be a mixture of that, the idea that you're becoming a melting pot.
Where did you move from?
I was in the New York City area, born and raised in North Jersey, worked in Midtown Manhattan my entire life. So,
yeah,
and
I'm from outside of Philadelphia. So,
you get it.
I up until last year, I said Bucks County, and then when the elections came, I decided I needed to say I was from Florida. But but people from New York, and I told my wife this, she's from the South mostly because she was an Air Force brat. But I said, look, after you break through that hard shell of everybody in New York and Philadelphia, you'll find out there's a soft heart in there. But you got to break through sometimes, because they're cautious. They're almost suspect. They're like, why are you being so nice to me?
Yeah.
I remember people moving here and they said, I got gas, and this was before you could pay at the pump, and I went in to pay and I couldn't get out of there. It's like 15 minutes. They wanted to talk to me. They wanted to know. Where are you from? What's your family like? Are you married? I mean, and I'm just getting gas. Well,
Well, that's it's one of the, but still, I will tell you, being in the South here for 5 years, it's not like that everywhere. It's again, it's a culture thing. It's if people do it right, they get it right. But there are some people that don't even care. It goes back to that busyness we talked about. Like, hey, as long as I'm making the numbers, I don't care about having my teller have a smile on their face because the transaction's still going to happen.
Well, you live in Charleston, so you're going to have to remind everybody every time you walk past a fence post with a little pineapple on top of the fence that that's the ultimate sign of hospitality, and it reflects all the way back to the colonial times when boat captains left and went to the islands and came back with the most coveted fruit, the pineapple. And when they returned, they took one of them, like less than 20% of them made it because they're bouncing around in a hole, and they jammed it onto the fence post. And that meant, come into my house, have a cocktail or coffee or chocolate, and enjoy dinner and have dessert while I tell you about all of the wonderful adventures I had while I was gone. It's the ultimate sign of hospitality, and that's where it comes from. So, and in Charleston, you have more little, I think they call them fennels, on top of fence posts that are pineapples than any other city I've ever been in.
Yeah, we love our pineapples. We have a big pineapple fountain, which is a big tourist trap. So yeah, we love our pineapples down here. And going back to the course of your career, you're not just a hospitality guy. You are a numbers guy, obviously, and you spent decades sort of measuring outcomes. Now, obviously, the ultimate metric is P&L. We all get there. But what tells the truth faster than revenue that this is working? That people are being hospitable and people are gravitated to your location. What tells you that things are going well before you see it in numbers?
Well, guest inspection scores is what a lot of hospitality, people look at, so that you have actually written metrics, but not everybody fills those out. I think I put in the book the last property that I was involved with and built. The best metric I had was going into the parking garage after working 10 or 12 hours, and people that owned the condominiums and or the guests that were staying in the condominiums would stop me in the garage and say, where do you get your people? They didn't talk about the fact that we had 16 different kinds of marble and granites and that we had enough crown molding to go to St. Louis and back. They wanted to talk about the people. And so and so I had a uniform on Fridays. I wore, white pants and a double-breasted blue blazer, and so they knew I worked there
Or you were a
because
gangster. One of the two.
I
Yes.
had an office there. Yeah, either that, yeah. Suit and tie though, that's why I had white pants because, people from the IRS, they don't dress that way. So, but they always said, your people are fun because we didn't put the positions, we put where you were from on your name tag, much like Disney. And so to strike up conversations, but where you can tell by looking at people. You can walk into a restaurant, for example, and feel if everything's going right or not. You can look at customers' faces. You can read the room. It's all there. And everybody knows it. It's a feeling. You know when your culture's right, and when the culture in the place you're in isn't right. And my best advice to you is if you get that feeling when you walk in, turn around and leave. Go somewhere else because there's other people that are getting it right. I have in the book Ace Hardware. You walk in, the sound, lighting, and temperature is perfect. They got popcorn popping, and you can get a free bag as you walk around looking for $1.86 bolt. And when you leave, you might as well have bought a John Deere tractor the way they teach you. Compare that to the big boxes like Lowe's and Home Depot. I'll pay a little extra to go to that Ace Hardware. See what I mean? It's hospitality. And so you got the guy on, what's it, they call him Mr. Wonderful on
Kevin
Shark
O'Leary
Tank.
on Shark Tank.
Yeah. Hey, I don't want to be Mr. Wonderful, but I wouldn't mind being Mr. Hospitality, being known for someone that said, we got a problem and we need to fix it and we need to stop what's going on and we can turn this around. But everybody has to assume that responsibility, take ownership of it, and work at changing it. And the steps on how to do that's actually in the book. So, I'm probably going to give away more books than I sell because for me, I retired from my profession, but not my purpose and passion. My purpose and my passion is to stop the deterioration of the lack of hospitality in our country. And I set my goals high. So it's not the neighborhood. It's not just the city I live in. I want people to grab this and go with it all the way through, because if the whole world, right, really focused on hospitality, you see it, by the way, in Italy, you see it in Greece, you see it in a lot of different countries, and you see how busy they are. They don't even have to advertise. And it's because it's the people, and it's the place, and it's the feeling, it's the connections, it's all that. And so it's hard to describe, it's hard to write it down. I had some help with that, right? But it's written down, and people need to pay attention to it. And if they do a little self-audit, or ask a friend or a member of family to walk into their business and report back to them about how that went, they'll, because when you go inside your business every day, you don't see it, you miss it. You don't know what you're missing, And so when other people tell you and show you, then it's time to have a meeting and get everybody to come together and say, how do we change this? How can we fix this? And you'd be surprised. The people that work for you will help you get there, because they'll feel like they have more of a meaningful purpose than just a job, which I would call an acronym, which stands for just over broke.
Well,
So
it's an amazing story, and I don't take this the wrong way, but I was getting like Shawshank Redemption vibes reading your story. And the reason I bring that up is, in the movie and book Shawshank, the prisoners talk about the struggle of how they would live once they left prison, because all they knew was prison life. And for you, all you knew or know is hospitality life. And you talk about in the book that Christmas Day after retirement, you had the urge to walk the floor and go back to your days. How are you struggling? I mean, it sounds like you're using the book and the work you're doing to kind of continue that. But how are you dealing with the fact that your identity has always been tied to hospitality and will continue, but the fact that you no longer have that as a day job? What has that been like for you?
Well, the first year or so, it was probably an adjustment, but so my highest trait is extroversion, no surprise. So, if I spend a whole day in the house or in my home office here, as an example, there's gonna come a time around 4 o'clock or something where I'll say to my wife, okay, we got to go somewhere. I don't know where, but we got to be around. I mean, when we go to restaurants, we always sit at the bar. One is because the server is within reach. And second is because there's people going to be sitting on those two stools and these two stools. And so by the time we leave, we feel like we all went to the same high school. I mean, because we're going to, you know, talking to people for extroverts is if we don't get to do that, it's like standing on our windpipe. I mean, we have to have it. It's like oxygen. So I've always done that. So I'm not suffering. Plus I live in a little town, a town of less than 15,000 people. So I can't go anywhere without seeing people I know. And I don't have to turn my hospitality on and turn it off. The hardest thing for me to do is always remember that God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I need to use them proportionately.
That's right. That's right. Bruce, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book, and you dedicate to your family, but mostly you say, thanks, Mom and Dad, for showing me at a very young age what hospitality looks like. Tell me about why it was important to dedicate the book to them and how the role they played in your nearly 50-year career in hospitality.
Well, of course they're deceased, but hopefully they're looking down and listening to all this. But well, my mother and father were very hospitable. My father was a traveling salesman, so during the week it was mostly Mom. But so I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Okay, even though we used the silver every day that my parents got for a wedding present, right? And we used cloth napkins, and we had a chandelier with candles that I lit like an aqualite before dinner. I mean, even during the busiest times, my first 19 years, when people came over, it wasn't just a meal, it was an experience. And so I actually even, taught cotillion. That they asked my wife and she was too busy, and they asked me to go do that. And I went, yeah. And so that was a very unusual assignment, but it was me and about 20 women. So, it was fun. And, if you like that kind of thing, like maybe some people just like paper napkins and paper plates, but why? We're only here for such a short time. Why not make everything fun and make everything an experience and remember that what happens around that table, can literally pattern a whole life. Our kids, we always ate. We have 4 kids. We always ate at the dinner table. There was never a TV on. There's no TV in the dining room. So that's how you stay connected. You stay connected because you practice the things that you've learned, and you never let all of these outside things, technology especially, like no phones at a table. I used to go, I mean, I still do this. I mean, you're going to think I'm crazy. I'll go into a restaurant and there's a party of 6, and all 6 are looking at their phones. And because I can't help it, I walk up and I go, hey, why don't you just talk to him? You don't have to text him. He's right there. And they laugh. And the next thing they do is they put him down. They don't even realize they're doing it. So you got to keep you got to keep the right things in focus and not let the world modify or change all the things that are there that are so enjoyable.
And you can read all about it in the Hospitality Advantage, Embracing the Competitive Power of Exceptional Hospitality in Every Industry. His name is Bruce Craul. Bruce, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Joe, my pleasure. I enjoyed this. I appreciate you reaching out to me.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Bruce and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.